What is happening, everyone? Jamal Thomas, host of the Jamal Thomas Morning Show under normal circumstances. When real man can't sleep, real man can do the news. I know it's not that late, but whatever. It's in the evening. It's later than what I'm typically doing the show. Interesting news, which is the reason why I'm doing this video. I don't necessarily pop in at a later time for no reason. Usually there's a reason. And usually it's big news, at the very least, as I define it. I've been very cynical of the peace process that has taken place between the Trump administration and Iran. I've been hopeful, but cynical. As I've pointed out in many other videos, I am a humble host. I am not a military expert. I do damn good at chess, software engineer, and I've covered the news for the last, 10 years, give or take. So from my point of view, man sitting on the moon looking at events. And in doing so, if I don't know, or for the very least, I can't necessarily overtly judge, I will give you points of, what's the word I'm looking for? Points of consequence. I'll call it that, points of consequence, meaning breaks in logic of it can go this way or it can go that way. I don't necessarily know which one it is. And in the negotiations, I told you, I don't know what is in Trump's mind. He has sent Witkoff, he sidelined initially his State Department. And so if you think of Witkoff as a realist, okay, then you may think, well, Donald Trump is actually trying to get a deal and his instincts are to get a deal. If you're looking at this over the arc of time and you look at one government after the next in the Middle East that has effectively been destroyed by the US, either through proxies or direct military intervention, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, oh my God, Libya, Sudan right now is a basket case. And as Wesley Clark pointed out, the last man standing is Iran. So if I look at that, I have to acknowledge that, right? And acknowledging that, I have to point out that that has taken place over the course of multiple presidential administrations, Democrat or Republican, both. The thread and that point of view seem to have gone through all of them up until the point where Iran is the last man standing, which is where we are. You have an administration that is seemingly completely obsequious to the state of Israel, even to the point of deporting people who are supposed to be in this country at the behest of a foreign government and going after free speech at the behest of a foreign government. So you have Trump, who spent this pressure campaign and has spent much of his campaign screaming that I'm going to bomb him, I'm going to bomb him. Iran's are nice people, but I'm going to bomb him, I'm going to bomb him if I don't get my deal, if I don't get my deal. Now, if I look back to Iraq, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They did these negotiations, and the negotiations, listen to Scott Ritter, was a stalking horse, and it's supposed to be a justification for war, not to prevent a war. So fast forward to the Trump administration, who's surrounded by Zionists, who is Netanyahu and all of these other people in his ear, who've given him God loads of money to be completely obsequious to the state of Israel. Not to mention you have plenty of people, creatures, whack jobs in the State Department and people he himself have brought on that want a war between the US and Iran, effectively fighting Iran at the behest of a foreign government, despite the fact that Iran is not doing anything to us. How could I ignore that, right? And so lines of logic diverge at some point. And at some point, there has to be a moment of consequence where it breaks one way or the other. Now, hence my cynicism in regards to the negotiations that are taking place, because I've seen this before. Iran is trying to get weapons of mass destruction. Okay, well, your own State Department says that's not the case. I know, but they're trying to get weapons of mass destruction. We can't allow them to do it. I know, but your own State Department, Iran is trying to get weapons of mass destruction. It's that. So you get negotiations where Witkoff goes, and are these negotiations done for the sole purpose of individuals like, okay, well, we tried. We did our best. We couldn't come to terms, couldn't come to agreement, couldn't come to a deal. And so now we have the justification to unilaterally, I guess, work with Israel to attack a country that is no threat to us, hasn't attacked us, and to do so just for shits and giggles, right? That seems to be where we're heading. That seems to be where we're heading. And I'm going to point this out in regard to the events that have just taken place over the course of the last few hours. I'm going to start here. This, I believe, is the USS Truman. I could be wrong, but it's one of our carriers in the Red Sea. All right. The way that plane, you see that plane go by? That is the way a plane is supposed to function on a ship, in an aircraft carrier. Now, Donald Trump has gone on a murder spree against the Houthis, again, another country, a country that hasn't attacked us, Yemen, and yet he's been killing civilians by scores, 80 something the other day, bombing civilians that are at a prayer festival or something to that effect, killing scores of them and bragging on Twitter about the murder of civilians. And despite Donald Trump making this argument that he has somehow pacified Yemen, he is still there doing bombings, which is weird if you indeed pacified the Houthis. And it's also weird that this ship had to make a quick maneuver where a plane fell off the ship into the ocean. What is it? Davy Jones locker. $60 million up in smoke, gone. Because the ship had to make a quick maneuver in order to get out of the way of missiles fired by Houthis, a group that he apparently said that he had already pacified. So there's that. That is deeply humiliating. Deeply, deeply humiliating. The notion that you have all of this air power, you have $1 trillion military, and your $1 trillion military is going up against one of the poorest countries. By the way, a country that has been bombed for the last, 15 years, whether by Saudi Arabia, invaded in some respects by jihadists, paid for by Saudi Arabia, and yet is still there firing missiles at Israel, doing God's work, firing missiles in the Red Sea, one of the only countries that have made a choice of saying, we're going to stand up for the Palestinians. The genocide is not just a crime against humanity. It is immoral, it's unethical, it is illegal by international law. And I know I said I don't believe in international law, but whatever, I'll bring it in. And just because none of the other quizzling, weak-willed Arab governments don't necessarily want to stand up for the Palestinians, we will. We will. All right. So Trump has made the choice. We need to find a way to stop them from doing that. And you could see in the leaks that took place that Vance was like, look, only 3% of American shipping goes through this. Why is this our issue? And yet, here we are, bombing Yemen. The thing to point out, though, is it hasn't worked. And the aircraft carrier continues to have to dodge in order to get out of the way because it's afraid that it's going to get hit by one of those missiles, hypersonic, drones, or regular missiles, or otherwise. They've been sophisticated in the way that they've been able to effectively respond. The Trump administration has effectively just taken the Israel policy of murdering civilians and bombing infrastructure, not necessarily being able to touch the group, Houthis and Nasrallah, that is doing this fighting. We are attacking them, again, just to point that out. One of the most interesting things that came out was this. It was a post, I believe this was the New York Times, and look at what it says. With a $1 trillion military, Houthis air defense have been hindering the U.S. ability to move into phase 2 of the operation, according to the report from CNN just today, citing unnamed U.S. officials. Quote, the U.S. was hoping to achieve air superiority over Yemen within 30 days, officials said, and degrade Houthis air defense systems enough to begin a new phase, focusing on ramping up intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance of senior Houthi leadership in order to target and murder them. And they weren't able to do it. A $1 trillion military. All of those assets weren't able to do it. And the drones and whatnot that they've been flying, the Houthis have been blowing that shit out the sky over and over and over. It's probably up to 30 at this point, where they've just been knocking up the sky. You can't even pacify the Houthis, one of the poorest regions in the world, or at the very least in the Middle East. All right, so you can imagine this is deeply humiliating for Hegseth, especially considering he is the TV personality alcoholic that Trump made head of the Pentagon. This story comes out because the U.S. can't apparently do the job, despite the fact of all the military assets that we have. The Brits have to come to the rescue. British Defense Secretary confirms UK airstrike on Houthis facility in Yemen. Speaking in the House of Commons, John Healey described action as, quote, limited and targeted. And their ship effectively goes into the Red Sea with the strike group in order to help the US because our military can't do it ourselves. Again, deeply humiliating for the Trump administration, but Hegseth also. All right. Trump has said this. He himself, listen to what he says here. It's important because I want to make a point. You can see the stock ticker, Dow Jones, dropping once again because, Trump is incompetent. But listen to this.
And they're experts on missiles. I mean, they actually make missiles. Nobody thought that, but they make missiles. They're highly sophisticated and they're very tough, but they've been very badly damaged. Nobody else was able to do that. But
they've been very badly damaged, and yet the reporting is that you have not been able to get air superiority. So there's that. And fair enough, it doesn't dodge or evade, but it's trying to move out the way, and they're reporting that as it was trying to move out of the way of missiles and drones, that the ship fell off the side. So fair enough. They make their own missiles. And as it's been reported on this channel, how do you even get missiles from Iran to Yemen at this point? Now, do you give know-how? Maybe. But you're not sending them weapons. That's not what's taking place. And Yemen, the Houthis, have their own mind in regards to what they want to do. As he said there, they make their own missiles. And yet, a humiliated Hegseth comes out with an outrageous, deranged tweet. I suspect he was drunk when he wrote this because he is a flaming alcoholic. I know alcoholics. My grandfather was a raging alcoholic. I know him when I see him. Message to Iran. We see your lethal support for the Houthis. We know exactly what you're doing. We know very well that the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned you will pay the consequences at a time and place of our choosing. Okay, so what does that mean? Is that you indicating that you plan to attack Iran? Is that what that means? And does the defense secretary, on his own, in this unprofessional tweet, get to decide that? Or does the president get to decide that? Has the choice already been made? Fascinating question, right? Considering you're supposed to be in negotiations with that same Iran. And weirdly enough, the logic that the U.S. is going with is that some sort of support for the Houthis, if indeed support is being given to the Houthis, is associated with Iran. And yet we have made the argument that funding all of these groups all across the world with money, weapons, guns, intelligence is not the U.S. effectively doing that. But when it becomes Iran, it's Iran's fault that the Houthis is effectively kicking the U.S.'s ass. Okay, that's wild. It's also wild that he's effectively saying, we will attack you at the time and place of our choosing. That's wild. All right, fast forward. Let's keep going. Donald Trump comes out and puts out a tweet because, it's Donald Trump. Again, incompetent. It's his administration. All purchases of Iran in oil or petrochemicals must stop now. Any country or person who buys any amount of oil or petrochemicals from Iran will be subject to immediately secondary sanctions. They will not be allowed to do business with the United States of America in any way, shape, or form. Thank you for your attention for this matter, President Donald Trump. It's amazing to me that Donald Trump believes that countries give a shit. That's the only shocking point about that tweet, right? You've just been beaten soundly in Ukraine, and for whatever particular reason can't accept it. You have lost a trade war with China. Don't take my word for it, New York Times. Wall Street Journal. You can look at the market, for God's sake, where there's a 2.7% contraction since Donald Trump's tariffs, the dollar losing value, jobs being lost in the United States. This is not indicative of success. It's not. He could spin it however he wants. So who gets oil from Iran? Well, China, for one. So you're effectively saying you're not doing business with China anymore. Okay, that's interesting. I would imagine plenty of other countries do also. So you have effectively decided to sanction multiple other countries, believing that they are going to somehow decide to not do business with Iran. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. I think China's going to tell you to F off, just like they told you to F off on those sanctions. But I'm pointing out that you're supposed to be in negotiations with Iran. Supposed to be. And yet, he is passing sanctions, and Hegseth is out here screeching that they are going to attack Iran at a time and place of their choosing. Now, when I make the point about the stalking horse stuff, okay, well, it seems like it goes in that direction. That whatever Wickoff responsibility was or job was, maybe his job wasn't to get a deal at all anyway. It was to make it look as if he was going to get a deal. And as I pointed out before, the way he started talking, Wickoff, versus the way he ended up talking were very different things. At the point where Wickoff gets attacked for sounding like the Iranian foreign minister, as if they're on the same page, thanks for that, as if they were on the same page, Wickoff backs away, Rubio becomes the speaking point, and Rubio goes with the idea that there needs to be a Libyan option for it, in the way that Netanyahu points out. Something, by the way, that was already a red line. So you immediately escalate your demands. You take a position that is clearly a red line because they said it was a red line from the very beginning, meaning we're not getting rid of our centrifuges. Full stop. That's off the table. We're not going to do it. I don't care what your threats are. That is off the table. So you go into negotiation knowing that that's off the table, and that is the very thing that you push for. And Rubio is effectively saying, hey, man, we're doing everything that we can. We're trying to get a deal. We've offered them a way where they can, have nuclear power. By the way, we're talking about a sovereign country. And Rubio is saying this on behalf of Israel, who is a batshit crazy fascist country running an open-air ghetto on one end and an apartheid state on another end, with nukes, by the way, that has murdered nearly 100,000 human beings, 2/3 of which are women and children, in 4 different areas. That's what we're talking about for context. Iran is a sovereign country. They can do whatever the hell they want. The U.S. has no right, but this is not about right. This is about power. Let's keep going. And then this article comes out. It's fucking outrageous. In the New York Post. Now, the fact that it's coming out in the New York Post implies that this is coming from Republican circles, because New York Post is effectively a Republican rag. Steve Witkoff shouldn't be leaving Iran or Russian negotiations, allies and insiders say. Okay, who are these allies and insiders? These are obviously people of the deep state, the blob, the swamp, if you want to call it that. And the things that they say in here are amazing. Right here. Anybody engaged in these kind of talks with Putin would benefit from having experienced Russian hands and his or her team bringing them along in meetings with the Kremlin. John Hardy, director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Russia program, said Witkoff's move because they don't like the fact that Witkoff is talking to Putin one-on-one. Now, Trump seems to put confidence in Witkoff in these negotiations, but Witkoff has been attacked relentlessly by people who want to take a hard line against Russia and don't like the fact that Witkoff is going to try to get a deal. So there's that. But the same thing is true about Iran, by the way. Right here. A member of Trump's first administration was more succinct. Nice guy, but a bumbling fucking idiot. This person said of Witkoff, he should not be doing this alone. A bumbling fucking idiot. That's how they describe Witkoff. They don't like the fact that Witkoff is in these negotiations. So, again, they don't like the fact that the realist, in quotes, is the one that is the front man for many of the negotiations that Donald Trump is using, and that Donald Trump has sidelined the whack jobs, the neocons, and the Luddites, and the troglodytes that are in the State Department and effectively surround Donald Trump. So they're trying to delegitimize Witkoff in these negotiations. He's a bumbling fucking idiot. One more. One more. This. Right here. The talks between the United States and Iran have been postponed indefinitely. Indefinitely. They have no idea when they're going to resume. And what's wild about it, the U.S. apparently never even confirmed that they were going to be at the talks in Amman. It says, however, a source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the United States had never confirmed its participation in the fourth round of talks in Rome, or in Rome, not Rome, but fair enough. This came out 4 hours ago, by the way. The source said that the timing and the venue of the next round of talks have yet to be confirmed, but are expected in the near future at some point. So they're expected in the near future with the United States passing sanctions on Iran and is linking Iran to the Houthis out of just rank humiliation that they couldn't pacify one of the poorest countries in the region. Yeah, okay, sure. Early on Thursday, Iran accused the United States of, quote, contradictory behavior and provocative statements. It's only contradictory if you believe that they were actually engaging in peace talks in real terms. If the peace talks was purely a stalking horse, then all of this makes all the sense in the world. Meaning, just be clear, it's purely contradictory if you think that Donald Trump was actually trying to get a deal. Because at this point, it's like, whoa, he's trying to get a deal. Now he's passing sanctions. What the hell? Now you're connecting us with the Houthis, and you're having this hyperbolic rhetoric from your defense department person who's saying he's going to attack us. What are we supposed to do with this? But if you look at it from the point of view of, just like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, just like them sending Scott Ritter, and Ritter realizing, oh, even though I believe I am here in order to prevent a war, I'm actually here to create the pretext for a war. Okay, well, in that viewpoint, then it makes sense. Regardless of what's in Witkoff's mind, ultimately, Witkoff might have been there purely as a stalking horse with the notion that we were going to create a pretext. We tried to negotiate. We couldn't negotiate. The negotiations fell apart. We acted in good faith. They kept supporting terrorism, quote unquote, in the region. And so negotiations fell apart. And now we have a pretext by which we can attack Iran. That's not contradictory at all. That actually makes sense. If that is indeed the point, which it could be the point, which is why I was very cynical about those negotiations. As I told you, it could break a particular way. And I wasn't sure what was in Trump's mind. And because I wasn't necessarily sure what was in Trump's mind, I gave the benefit of the doubt, even though I was somewhat skeptical of the negotiations, given the historical context and the lunatics that Donald Trump has effectively surrounded himself with. People indeed are policy. And if people indeed are policy, and you're putting Rubio, Waltz, who just been fired, and some of these other people around you, the Zionists, for God's sake, and you're arm in arm with Netanyahu, and he's coming out saying we're going to do the Libya model, and your demand seems to be escalating to a maximalist demand that you know Iran is never going to accept, then what am I to think of this? Especially now that you're making this connection between, oh, the Houthis are somehow a one-to-one with Iran, and the fact that we can't pacify the Houthis is a humiliation deeply for us. And so now we're pulling out of talks, or postponing, as they were using the term, with an alcoholic guzzling a fifth of vodka, screaming about attacking a country that has not attacked us. It's not done anything to us. And that we are totally the aggressors in this conflict. If that is not a sinister turn, I don't know what is. We will see how this unfolds. Iran seems to be confused by the whole thing, or at the very least they're projecting confusion. Maybe they're not confused at all. Maybe they accepted this already from the very beginning in regards to their point of view, but they were open to negotiations. Who knows? Maybe Trump is being maneuvered. That could be true. He's deeply incompetent. Deeply incompetent people can be maneuvered in particular ways. So that may be possible, meaning he may have sent Witkoff out there with the notion of real and legitimate negotiations and people whispering in his ear, continuously whispering in his ear. And the last person in the room Donald Trump went with, and it's like, hey, he's right. Those Houthis are effectively getting something from Iran that allows them to, defy us, the great United States. How great are you if you can't pacify even Yemen? And if you can't pacify Yemen, what the hell are you going to do with Iran? And I have a hard time believing that many of these countries are going to acquiesce to this notion of secondary sanctions, and damn sure China is not. So you have effectively put out in a tweet that you are not going to accept anything from China because China, I strongly suspect, is going to tell you to F off. just like they did with the trade war. This is a sinister turn. Now, the question becomes, what does it mean? And again, as I keep telling you, I don't know what is in Trump's mind. And because I don't know what's in Trump's mind, I don't necessarily know where his original intentions were in all of this. I can only tell you where this seems to be headed and where this seems to be going. And as I told you before, language can box a president in. If you are screeching to the hilt that you're going to attack a country if so-and-so doesn't take place, and then so-and-so is not taking place, that's a hell of a cliff to walk back off. Is Trump willing to eat that much crow? Does his ego allow him to eat that much crow? He can't even eat crow in a military conflict that he lost, that he acknowledges that he lost. If you are saying that Ukraine is a proxy war, which it is, and that Ukraine is going to lose the entirety of the country in a year or two, then that means you lost the war. You, the United States, lost the war, with the president probably being too stupid to understand that he's acknowledging that the U.S. lost the war, despite the fact that he's issuing demands in regards to some peace deal and is shocked that Putin is telling him to F off. I'm saying if he can't eat crow in a situation where between 3 a.m. between him and his God, knows that he is lost and knows that he has no cards in, would he be willing to fuck over the world and risk it all? Power is a shadow on the wall. It's one thing for people to believe you have power and respond to the fact that they believe you have power. It's another thing for you to actualize it. When you actualize it, you're putting your chips on the table. And the dealer can't take your chips. They can take your chips. I think we're vastly underplaying the capabilities of Iran. And if Donald Trump is going to test that, oh my God. Oh my God. So, again, I'm not going to keep this long. This wasn't meant to be a very long video. 27 minutes is way too long for an explanation, but I did want to explain it. Walsh is a UN ambassador now, right? They fired him. They fired him on Twitter, of all things. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. Hopefully, this doesn't go for the worse. Hopefully, my cynicism is proven wrong. We'll see. Stay tuned. By the way, I will say that this is playbook, by the way. Pathway to Persia, the document, Brookings Institute. This is exactly that, right? Hey, let's have negotiations. Let's pretend that these negotiations are real. Let's, engage in it as if to show the world that the United States is working towards some kind of end. Now, the premise of it is ridiculous, right? Because the U.S. is doing this to a country that is sovereign, that we have no right to do this to at all. And I'm saying right. But again, power doesn't need a right. Power in and of itself is the right to do it. God is not going to get involved to prevent it. The UN is not going to get involved. There's no other Leviathan that's going to get involved. And so you do it because you can do it. But the phony negotiations was something very similar with Project for a New American Century that George Bush engaged in. And they're going back to the same playbook of we're pretending like we're doing negotiations. All right, we send Wickoff, pretending like we're doing negotiations. The catch becomes when Rubio starts to pipe up. It's like, whoa, that's weird. I thought Wickoff was the guy. And then they put Michael Anton on. It's like, whoa, that's weird. He doesn't have any experience. He's like a Bush guy. Well, he's a neocon. So if people are policy, and these are the people that are talking, what am I to take of this? And now you have that lunatic Hegseth coming out with that tweet, and Donald Trump coming out with his tweets. And then you get negotiations seem to have stalled where the U.S. didn't even bother to come up with a fourth round. That's interesting. That's interesting. Let's hope my cynicism is proven wrong here. I deeply hope it does. It is. I deeply hope it is. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You guys have a good night. And I'll see you tomorrow morning. Be safe.